Hello and welcome to today's program on overcoming obstacles to change. And even though we often hear that change is hard, the truth is change is constant. Our lives are always shifting in big and small ways. Learning how to face these challenges or changes with flexibility and confidence can make a world of difference, especially as we age or care for someone who is aging. To explore this topic with me, I am delighted to welcome renowned gerontologist again, Sally Duplantier. Sally is the founder of Zing and has a mission to help older adults live their best lives longer through better nutrition, more movement, better sleep, less stress, and more social engagement. Sally is also the host of Wellness Wednesdays, a free service to the community that provides evidence-based programs related to healthy aging. Sally was recently named by MSN as one of their top 15 health experts. She was also named by LA Weekly as one of the top 10 entrepreneurs breaking barriers and making a difference. Now let's welcome Sally Duplantier.
Vanessa, it is a delight to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
To kick us off, can you give us your definition of change?
Well, that is a super question. So I think of change very simply. I think of it as a bridge from where we are today to where we want to be.
That's powerful. And as a gerontologist, you work with older adults. We often hear things like, this individual are too old to change or too set in their ways. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm an older adult myself, and so I would tell you that that's just not true. That's a stereotype that we're too old to change. Because, if change is hard, we're still capable of doing hard things. However, I will say that we may be a little more fond of our routines. And so let me give you an example.
Sure.
I have stepsons in their 30s, and they talk about FOMO. They talk about the fear of missing out. Vanessa, for me, it's kind of like JOMO. It's the joy of missing out.
Oh, wow.
And I will tell you, like on a Friday night, I don't want to go to the movies. I don't want to get dressed up and go out to dinner. I want my husband to come home and play board games with me. And then I want to put my pajamas on and we sit in front of the TV and we watch our Netflix show. And my dog Bella's curled up by me. I'm like, that's a good Friday night.
Wow.
But, the thing is, just because we like our routines, it doesn't mean we can't change.
Wow. FOMO, JOMO. I love that philosophy, Sally. But change is still hard, right? So what gets in the way of us making changes, please?
Well, I've really considered this question, Vanessa, from the perspective of older adults. But you'll see I connected to younger adults as well. And I think I see a couple of obstacles to change. And the first one, quite honestly, is mindset. And I believe that with older adults, kind of the way you let off, we think we may be too old to change, or we hear that in the world. There's ageism is this stereotype where the world puts people into a category based on their age. And they make decisions about what that person can and can't do based on how old they are. And I think the real problem is when we start buying into that ourselves and we start believing it and become self-talk.
Correct. And again, Sally, I hear the word ageism and something that's really, I'm very passionate about this, given that this has been a very hot topic at USC, and something that I wish maybe if we can just backtrack, if you can simplify the definition of ageism, can you please share it with us? What's your definition of ageism?
Sure. It's a stereotype or a prejudice about someone just because of age. And it's kind of like it's the last socially acceptable form of prejudice, in part because it's so common And in
Correct.
part because we kind of make fun of being old.
Correct.
So there's humor attached to it. But if you go and you look at birthday cards, for example,
Mhm.
I'm appalled at how many birthday cards either compare me to a dinosaur, a fossil, a relic, and it's supposed to be funny, and it's not funny.
Think what I'm hearing from you is like society. This is actually what I'm hearing from me is this is a harder prejudice or discrimination to eliminate just because society pretty much accept it. Social media's accepting it, right? And there's needs to be what I'm hearing from you is that there's requires a social reform immediately if really want to combat ageism. Now, what I heard from you as well is that those older adults themselves start believing it. So, how do we overcome our own self limiting beliefs if this is the case, if we're trying to stop ageism?
So I would agree with that. There's a societal implication here, but it starts with us. I'm going to answer that question by saying that ageism cuts both ways, and it's not just prejudice about being older, but it's also about being younger. I
Mhm.
started my first company when I was 28 years old. And I didn't know what to call it. My name was Sally Crawford at the time, so I called it Crawford and Associates. And I got my business cards made with Sally Crawford. And this was the 80s. I wore the suits with the padded shoulders and little high heels. And I went and called on companies and I'd give them my business card. And Vanessa, people would look at me and they'd look at my card and they'd look back and they'd say, "Oh, gee, honey, is that your husband's company?" Or,
Ooh,
"Gee, honey, is that your dad's company?"
wow.
And so what I've
Wow.
come to realize now in my 70s is that you can't win. Like the world is going to judge you whether you're too young or you're too old.
Correct.
So it gets back to your question then, what can we do to overcome our own self-limiting beliefs?
Correct. And Sally, do you mind telling me some of the obstacles again to making change? What are some of the obstacles that you can share to our audience?
Yeah, so I think one is mindset, and I will give
Mindset.
you a practical example of how to
Sure.
overcome mindset. Then I think the other one, which we can dive into, is comparing ourselves to others or comparing ourselves to a younger version of ourselves.
Mhm.
Here's what I found, Vanessa, with respect to overcoming mindset, is that just trying to talk ourselves out of a self-belief doesn't work. I think what we have to do is take action. And I
Mhm.
think we have to do something outside our comfort zone. We have to push ourselves in a direction that may not be totally comfortable. It might even be a little scary and
Uh-huh.
see what happens.
Mhm.
And I have a great story. Can I
Sure.
share that story? This goes back to when I was gosh, I first started Zing. This was
Mhm.
2019.
Mhm.
And I had taken a course in nutrition science with Dr. Christopher Gardner. And I
Mhm.
was so impressed with this class. And I really wanted to meet him. It was an online class, so I'd never met him.
Got it.
And I decided I wanted to get a meeting with him. Well, that was kind of scary because he was like a world-class nutrition scientist, one of the top nutrition scientists in the
What's
world.
his name again, Sally?
Christopher Gardner,
Got
Dr.
it. Mhm.
Christopher Gardner at Stanford. And so somehow I decided it might be a good idea to write him an email and see if he wanted my feedback about this class that I had taken. And it took me a week to write the email. Yeah, I wanted it to
Uh-huh.
be exactly, perfect. And I'll never forget, Vanessa, when I sent it and I'm like clutching my throat thinking, oh my God, I sound like such a goof, such a nerd. Like,
Oh, wow.
oh, would you like some feedback from me about the class? And about 8 o'clock that night, he responded.
Oh, my.
And, in response to, do you want some feedback about this class? He wrote in all caps, yes, with
Mm.
3 exclamation points. And then he said, could I bring some other people?
He said that.
He
He
said that.
said.
And so I met with him and 12 people. We had a lovely discussion. And I would say that that meeting and the success I had was a catalyst for me then going back to graduate school at USC.
Mm,
We met and getting a master's of science in gerontology in my mid 60s. And so I think that, to overcome our own mental mindsets, we just have to take some action. We don't know exactly how it'll turn out, but it's a great example is that sometimes it turns out better than you ever thought.
mm. And Sally, it sounds like you're saying that to make positive change, we really need to hone in on what we truly want, right?
Yes, yes, we do. I would agree. I would agree. And we don't always know that, but we need to take some action. We at least need to be intentional about it and take some action.
Got it. Do you think that it has something to do with also your title, being a very successful entrepreneur as well, for many years? Do you think that might be one of the contributing factor why Mr. Gardner responded to your email? What are your thoughts about that?
So it's so funny because Dr. Gardner and I have become friends and we've discussed this. I found out in that case that it was the first time Stanford had ever run that class, and they were really looking for feedback.
Oh my,
So I don't think it was anything special
got
about
it.
me. I think it was just that I asked and he was interested. Uh,
Mm,
and that's the thing about like doing scary things. To me it was scary is that you just don't know how it's going to turn out. Worst case, I would have been ignored, but I
right.
wasn't. And Dr. Gardner and I went on. I did an internship with him. We co-authored a paper. I helped him write a book proposal when he decided to write a book. I mean, we've gone on and done some outstanding work together, but it started
Wow.
with that message.
I hear being fearless, and I can't help but think about Franklin Roosevelt, who say you need to be in the arena, right? And that's the man in the arena, right? Have you heard of that, Sally?
I have not. I love
Oh
that.
my gosh, that's really something that have helped me a lot, navigating care indeed for 15 years. Like Franklin Roosevelt, like there's a poem, I think, or a speech that he created where it's all about the man in the arena, that you have to be in the arena. You can be a spectator for many years, but does it change your life? But I think being in the arena,
Yeah.
getting beaten up, those are what you call fearless. And I think
Yeah.
that's really something that's, that the concept of what you're saying, be fearless, right?
So, and this brings me, I love this segue here because it brings me to the second thing that might get in our way of change is
Yeah.
comparing ourselves to others.
Tell
So
me more.
people may hear my story and they may go, "Oh my gosh, well, I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to." I think Vanessa, I'm going on for a doctoral program now. A doctorate in public health. I mean, how cool is that? But it's cool to me. It's not necessarily cool to everyone. So when we
Mhm.
talk about making positive change, I think it's important to focus on what we love to do or what we think we might like to do. And you mentioned that earlier. So for me, I love the education. I love the learning. I love the research I'm able to do now with these different degrees.
Mhm.
But not everybody wants to go back to school.
Right.
I'll tell you another funny story. I watched a Netflix film recently about a famous swimmer, Diane Nyad,
Oh,
who
yes.
did you see that?
Yes. Such an inspirational movie. Absolutely.
After five failed attempts, she swam from Cuba to the coast of Florida, and she did this in shark-infested waters.
Got
And
it.
I have to tell you, I watched that film and I started feeling kind of badly about myself. I was like, well, I could never do that. Like I could, I started feeling lesser. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had to realize that I don't want to swim with the sharks. And I don't even like to swim. We've had a pool. I've lived here for 14 years. I think I've been in five times, maybe. I don't even
Mm-hmm.
like to swim. So sometimes what happens is that we compare ourselves to others and we
Correct.
start to think, oh, I can't because. And it's not something we want to do.
Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. I think, for myself, Sally, I've battled, this kind of mindset for years. Like, I cannot be like her or something. Like just meeting you for the first time, like we had our brunch in Los Altos, and I'm like, I want to be her. How can she talk like this? How can she like present herself with so much grace and confidence? I want to be like her. I want to talk like Sally. And I think that in some ways I unknowingly diminish or minimize myself. And that's still a work in progress for me, but I think I'm super glad that we're talking about this, because these are some of the real human issues and challenges that we all go through, right?
Yes, it is so true. And I can't tell you how many times, as you mentioned, Wellness Wednesdays, I have these
Yes.
amazing guest speakers, and I think, oh, I want to be like her. I want to be like this person. And I just don't think we give ourselves enough credit for who
I don't
we
think so.
are and the fact that we can still do more. And, I would tell people that if you have no idea what you want to do, be kind to someone. Goodness knows the world needs more kindness right now. You can always help somebody else. And if you don't know who else to help, adopt a dog. As you know, one of my greatest joys has been Bella for 4 years and
Mhm.
having this being to take care of.
Correct. Kindness.
Yeah,
I mean, that's such a powerful word, and kindness towards ourselves. Those are super critical, especially if we want those change and
yeah,
growth to really happen.
yeah.
And
And
that,
while we're talking about kindness to ourselves, then I
yes.
would add it's not only comparing ourselves to others, but
Mhm.
it's comparing ourselves to a younger version of ourselves.
Mm,
I did yoga for decades, and
got
in
it.
my 50s, it was one of my times when I retired. I've retired a couple times. I did yoga every day for about 45 minutes to an hour, and I studied twice a week with a professional trainer,
Uh-huh.
instructor. And believe it or not, in my 50s, I was so flexible, I could get my toes on my head. Well, I am so far away from that now, but I still love to do yoga. And
Got it.
if I go back, I look at those pictures, if I feel bad about myself, that's self-defeating.
Correct.
Celebrate as an older adult, celebrate what we can still do, what we love to do, and
Mhm.
not think about the younger self before an accident, before an injury, or just,
Wow.
before 20 years. It makes
Mhm.
a difference.
Correct. And I think those are ways to really indirectly advocate against ageism, right? Starting within yourself and really like, acceptance. Acceptance that each journey, each phase that we have in our lives are, there's something that it brings to our transformation. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And Sally, we've been talking about big picture, about change, the obstacles that get in our way, like our mindset, comparing ourselves with others. Can you give us a practical example, though, of how we might apply this to something we want to do, like starting an exercise program?
Well, that is so good because, as you know, I talk a lot about health and wellness, and I talk about health behaviors that are going to support that. So, yeah, let me give you an example. Let's talk
Sure.
about starting a weight training program. Strength training is so important for older
Mhm.
adults because our muscle mass declines, and strength training will also keep us mobile and it will help prevent falls. So, super important. So, let's say that I want to start a strength training program. So, the first thing is that I need to just believe that I can do it. And maybe I can't just turn a key in my head, but I can take some action. So
Mhm.
outside of my comfort zone, I could go to a gym. I could go to a gym and do something with weights for 10 minutes. I could work with a trainer. I could get
Mhm.
some resistance bands, but I'm going to have to take some action. I'm going to have to try something, do something, but
Got it.
small, not big. You're not going to like be, curling 20-pound,
Mhm.
weights for biceps. Then this idea of not comparing ourselves. If you go to the gym and you start to look at what other people are doing, and this is your first time or you haven't done it in years, you're going to be really disappointed. You're going to say,
Correct.
well, I can't do that. I can't be that. So don't
Mm-hmm.
do that. And then don't compare yourself if you're starting back with weights or you've never done it, what your younger self could have done. You're not going to be in as good a shape as you were 20 years ago for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So don't compare yourself. What can you do? Where can you start? Well, you have to start somewhere. So that's the action piece.
For what I'm hearing is like really those, we take actions, especially when we're fearful, when we're scared, when we're doubtful, and at the same time, really, I know it's easier said than done, but really not comparing ourselves to others, so we really understand our big and small wins, right?
Oh,
So
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. And I would have to tell you, Vanessa, is that even though I talk about this, I've given presentations on this, I have to remind myself this every single day, and I have days when I'm like, I don't want to do something or something is scary. And I say, okay, Sally, you can still do hard things. You're never too old to do hard stuff. And I just have to remind myself of that.
Got it. And sometimes our brain is telling us, you cannot do it. And sometimes our mind is our worst enemy, right? And what I'm hearing from you is just do the opposite at times when you're being self-defeating.
Yeah. Do
So
something, take some action. Absolutely. And
action.
remind ourselves that even though we're older, we're still capable of doing hard things. We're never too old to learn, to grow, to change, to contribute to the world in a positive way.
Wow. Wow. Sally, do you have any closing thoughts though you'd like to share with our audience? I know this is a very short collaboration, but do you have any closing thoughts you'd
Yeah,
like to?
I think maybe it's a reframing that, too often we think I can't because. And what I'd like to leave people with is thinking, yes, I can.
Wow. Yes, I can. And Sally, I cannot even think of the most appropriate time to talk about this ageism and, self-love and how important change is in order for us to really grow and transform our lives, that those are needed even though it's hard, right? So thank you for your time sharing with us your knowledge and being so generous with your all your insights. And I'm really hoping, wishing you all the best in your doctorate degree soon and PhD. And we are rooting for you. And thank you again for trusting Care Indeed for this collaboration, Sally.
I love the collaboration with you and the organization that you represent. So thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's watching this.
Thank you.